Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend just a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Daniel Smith, the genealogy librarian, and you are listening to the Local Genealogists Speak podcast series. In this episode, we are hearing from a local genealogist about their experiences doing family history research. We are also listening for their tips and suggestions for doing genealogy. As a librarian, I am convinced that we all learn from each other, and we all have valuable information to share. By the way, this episode will be a part of a larger series of interviews with local genealogists, so be on the lookout for others. Today, I am joined by Joe, a local genealogist who has graciously agreed to answer questions about his favorite ancestor and genealogy journey, DNA, adoption records, and more. In honor of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, Joe will also share a favorite part of U.S. history. Thank you for joining us, Joe.
Thank you.
As we begin, I would love to ask you, why did you start researching your family history?
Well, when I was a child, I remember that my parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents and great-grandparents would get together and they would reminisce, and it was just absolutely fascinating. But since I'm adopted, I thought, hey, there's a parallel universe out there that I would love to explore and get to know, because these stories I heard were so fascinating.
I love that. I love that you had those stories or that oral history that started you, but made you then think, there's more stories that are a part of who I am.
Absolutely.
And that you kind of started in this journey as someone who's adopted. So I love that. I would love to also hear a little bit more about your favorite ancestor and why they're your favorite.
This was a tough question, because it's like saying, which of my daughters is my favorite? And I had to expand a little bit. I have 3 that I'm researching right now and want to get a better in-depth understanding of. My 8th great-grandmother was convicted and sentenced to death at the Salem witch trials in 1672. My 4th great-grandfather was a sergeant in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, and I've learned some things with regard to him, primarily through the help of the ladies from the DAR who I met at Cook Library. And then my 2nd great-grandparents, they traveled from New Hampshire to Illinois, and the route they initially followed was going down the Ohio River and then to the Mississippi River, but they followed the same route on the Ohio River that Meriwether Lewis followed 47 years earlier. And that was due to the Lewis and Clark expedition, which started in 1804, and it was set up by President Andrew Jackson. Interestingly enough, my great-grandfather, who was 5 years old at the time of that travel down the Ohio River, his name was Andrew Jackson Bradbury. So there's a tie-in there, I believe.
I think so, totally.
Yes.
You don't surprise me by saying that was a hard question. I've heard other folks say similar things about which child do I choose? So thank you for taking liberty and sharing a few, because it does sound like they all have led interesting lives and have had great journeys, and you've been journeying with them.
Absolutely.
I would love to hear about your journey in general. Like, how has your genealogy journey impacted you?
The greatest impact on me is both identifying who my biological mother and father were, and also being able to connect with my siblings. I am the oldest of 11, and they were so excited when we connected, and that was through Ancestry DNA. Yes, and we've stayed in communication. We've visited with each other. 3 of my sisters came up this last summer to spend some time at our home and so forth. So I can't say it's been a reunion. It has been an actual union, because until 2018, both they and I were totally clueless that there was this relationship.
That's amazing that you've been able to pick up and establish that relationship with each other. You've kind of hinted at some of the ways that DNA's helped you, both find those cousins and your siblings, but I would love to know, do you have any more about that you would like to share about what excites you about using DNA in genealogy research?
Certainly. Obviously, the uniting with my siblings takes priority, but also it was extremely interesting to find my genetic makeup. It's all European, but the breakout between the various areas within Europe, it was absolutely fascinating, and it's somewhat corroborated with regard to my research in that my genealogy data shows a certain percentage Scottish, and when I encountered the fact that my great-grandmother came from Scotland, voila. It was sort of, okay, there's loads of ways of confirming or substantiating even what your DNA is telling you.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the parts I really enjoy, too. And I always love that as they get more and more people to take DNA tests and do more research and get the data sets, that's all beginning to really improve, and it refines itself, and I love that.
Yeah, plus the more people that have this test done, it just enormously increases the probability that you have more connections with others.
Absolutely, yeah. And especially like you were talking about being adopted earlier, it really can open up a lot of things.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious about those, for other people who are adopted, how do you have suggestions for those folks about resources or finding their ancestors and things like that?
To a limited extent, in that, mostly I think many will find these roadblocks. The court and the adoption agency seal their records. At least that's been my experience in trying to obtain information in that regard. For me, the best bet was the DNA. That really opened it. I had only one confirmatory document, and that is decades ago when I was a graduate student. I was preparing to do research in Antarctica. The ship I would be going on was ported in New Zealand, so I needed a passport. And when I went downtown to get a passport and they saw my supposed birth certificate, it looked odd to them for whatever reason, and they needed more information. Fortunately, I was able to get, which should have been sealed, but due to my situation, where I was going and so forth, I received a copy of my decree of adoption. If anybody can get their decree of adoption, the wealth of information that has, it mentioned my birth mother, my birth name, the individual who was my legal guardian. It mentioned my parents who were adopting me. It also served as the legal document for the changing of my name. So it just had an absolute wealth of information. It identified where I was born and so forth. So there was one interesting glitch. It's intriguing, and I never know if I will get to the bottom of it. And that is, my decree of adoption indicates that my biological mother was my sole surviving parent. And I wonder, since I was born in 1945, is this a one-off, or in a situation where World War II is going on? Was it a way of excluding biological fathers from the loop? And I don't know. I doubt the court would have been involved in that, but I'm not sure if adoption agencies are. It's sort of a curiosity. It seems strange to be a one-off. In actuality, my biological father died in 1972 in a car accident, as I found out in all my exploring with my cousins and so forth on that side. But it's intriguing, given that's a legal document, that it would specify that. But it'd be interesting to find out from other adoptees if they've encountered similar questions. And I don't think in any way my biological mother was confused as to who my father was. And he was a neighboring farmer, and he was not in the service. So, but one really aside thing is when my biological mother passed away in 2014, going through her things, they found an engagement ring and also photos of a staff sergeant in the Army. And through my research, there was a young man, Leo Malone. He died 21 months before I was born. However, on my decree of adoption, my biological mother named me Leo. So I think she named me in remembrance of her fiancé who died in World War II, and for whatever reason chose that it was best not to involve my biological father. Although the stories I hear of him, he was a relatively decent man.
That's fun. That's fun. Thank you for sharing so much in depth about that. I think a lot of people will find that very interesting about that whole journey and what you've been able to discover. And I'm sure, like you said, there's always more to learn. So that's the fun part of genealogy. So now, in honor of America 250, it's time to ask you about your favorite part of U.S. history.
Well, that would again tie into my fourth great-grandfather, of course, with regard to the Revolutionary War. His name was Sanders Bradbury. He was born in 1737. He joined the Army in 1777. Although, unfortunately, he died in service in 1779, so he never actually lived to see the establishment of the United States. My fourth great-grandfather was 40 years old when he joined the Army, and he had a wife and children. And as I said, 2 years later, she was a widow. Now, it'd be intriguing to find what was the cause of death. At this point, all I know is from the documents it says died in service. So it's limited there. But I know the regiment he was associated with, who the captain was, and who the colonel was. So that's research to be done.
That's exciting. It'll keep you going, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us, Joe. We hope that you enjoyed listening to and learning from Joe. Hopefully, you are also inspired by something he shared or said. Maybe he even gave you an idea to help further your research. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with those who you think would also be interested. One of the best things you can do to support us is to take a moment to comment or leave a rating for this podcast. Those comments and ratings help get this podcast noticed. We'll be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.